Good evening. This evening we're going to do a mindfulness meditation type practice. It's going to be focusing on the ambient noise in the environment, and we'll find ourselves mostly in the seated posture here. We have a few options to move into a seated posture. This might cause some stress on the ankles, sitting with our legs underneath. But there's also a meditation bench, like in Zen meditation, where we can raise and sit on the bench instead of on the ankles. There's also a pillow we could use underneath to sit on, or just sitting cross-legged or in lotus posture. Now for me, cross-legged is good for now, and I could probably stay here for a little while. But there's always that effort to have more of a straight spine. Not exactly straight, but I mean not rounding it excessively. So, we can find ourselves here in the cross-legged seated posture. Or today I have these blankets here that I can roll up and use for some support. Finding support in our seated posture. Got these blankets. Kind of roll it, fold it up, and bring it up to a certain height. We'll bring this one over the top here. And this is more of a soft support. I've tried before sitting on the foam roller, but that actually cuts off circulation after a while, because sitting on this with the legs kind of in a Burmese type posture, like this, that's hard pressing against the thighs. Eventually the circulation starts to go a little bit. So it's a little too hard of a surface. But a pillow or some towels here, these are definitely better. Excuse me, I just gotta wipe my nose here for a second. All right, all of a sudden I had a runny nose. So you can find ourselves seated on the blankets, some support, and this brings our pelvis a little more into an anterior pelvic tilt. And you can see on my, there's a set of 10 videos where I talk about awareness of neutral pelvis while seated in meditation. A neutral pelvis is kind of a term that's used just to mean that there's a balance between, rounding too much or extending too much, but finding the neutral spot where you feel balanced, and this way you can have good posture while sitting. So here it is, more of a neutral pelvis, a little bit of an anterior pelvic tilt. And, I'm not in a perfect lotus posture, but this is supported. If I wanted to place my hands on the knees, or even like a Zen type posture, right here, probably stay here for a little while. There's not too much pressure on the insteps of my feet, so the blood circulation will be okay. I mentioned about the awareness of ambient noise. Well, with mindfulness meditation, there's different ways to bring awareness in the moment. Of course, two of the main things are breathing and posture. So we can begin by just finding that comfortable seated posture. We can stay here for about 25 minutes and feeling the sit bones on the bottom of the ilium there. That neutral feeling pelvis, and feeling the shoulders moving kind of in line with the hips and the ears. The chin tucked in slightly, and the top of the head reaching up. You can relax our shoulders and our arms. noticing that our feet are also relaxed. We'll bring the focus into the breath. We can imagine that it's sinking down towards the navel area. As we're inhaling, expanding the belly, letting the musculature rise into the chest, expanding, and exhaling from the chest, releasing the belly. Inhaling and exhaling in a relaxed, more deeply with each rounded breath. We'll take a few moments here, gaining some awareness of the posture and the breathing. And if at any moment you feel discomfort, you could always, shift position. You could lie on your back if you want. You could sit in a chair and do this as well. Or you could just switch your legs, and that way it's more comfortable, or maybe bring them up and windshield wiper them side to side, extend them out in front of you. Or just sit for shorter periods of time until you feel better. And as we're beginning to have some awareness in our posture and our breathing, I'm going to quote something from something that's known to be a philosophical text from yoga. There's a lot of yogic philosophy texts. And this is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Supposedly these are what his students transcribed or passed on from what his teachings were. So he didn't actually necessarily sit down and write these, but this is from what the students understood and passed on. And even I've heard that there's such, it's possible that Patanjali didn't exist as we think we know him, or whatever. He's it's definitely over 2,000 years old, about 2,500 years old, that this text originates from. And some people like to think that yogic philosophy is as old as 5,000 years. Of course, by the time this was written, yoga had already been around. So certainly yogic philosophy is several thousands of years old at this point. But this is one of the main modern yoga texts. It's a lot to understand, but I'm just going to flip to the first section. It's broken down in books, and the first one is Samadhi Pada, portion on contemplation. And it starts with, the translation here says, now the exposition of yoga is being made. Ata yoga dushasanam. I'm going to do my best to pronounce some Sanskrit here. And the second verse or sutra, it says, yogas chitta vritti nirodha, which means the restraint of the modifications of the mind stuff is yoga. I've also read in another translation that it means yoga is stilling the fluctuation in one's consciousness. So taking that idea of stilling the mind, of course it's up to a lot of different interpretation, and I'm not an expert in yogic philosophy. But then we come into the practice of mindfulness, stilling the fluctuations. And one way we can do this is being mindful of the posture and the breath, as we're doing now. Another way is to focus on anything in the environment. For example, ambient noise. So I invite you this evening, or where you are now, whatever time it is, to find a relatively quiet space, knowing that that ambient noise is kind of like a reflection of what we're perceiving in the environment. So this is going to be mostly seated meditation. And let's begin with focusing on those rounded breaths. Still seated? We'll take a few moments here, deepening into the pose and deepening the breath. Then taking some time to bring some awareness back into the room, the space. What do we notice there? As we're moving into the posture and the deeper breathing, we can focus on those things to be mindful of. Now let's take it a step further. We can remain here. Of course, there's nothing really a step further from, within type practice. But we can also pay attention to the external environment and use that as a point to be mindful of. My legs are getting a little bit, need some movement there, so we can just shake your legs out a bit, or you can remain in the same posture. Perhaps you're lying down or seated in a chair. Maybe give a slight self-type massage on the calves. And then switching to that comfortable seated posture again. I think it was this way this time. There we go. Ankles definitely. Finding that good sit bones on the or using a pillow or blankets. And then going into that exhale, inhale, those rounded breaths. And this time, I'd invite you to pay attention to not only the posture and the breath, but also the sounds and the environment. With each rounded breath, going more deeply. And actually, one thing I noticed was when I started, I heard some traffic and people, but when it was quiet, I could really hear actually like insects chirping and things like that, which I didn't think was that loud, but being in the city area, I didn't expect that. I'm not near any wood lines or anything like that, but there are some trees over here, but it's not like I'm near the woods. So you might be surprised what you actually can hear if we're just focusing on the moment. You may even hear some sounds from within. So now closing the eyes if it's comfortable. Finding the neutral posture. Spine extended. Raising the top of the head, the crown of the head up. And finding that point of focus, whether it's the posture or the breath. And then immersing, being aware of the ambient noise in the environment. We'll take a few minutes here. bring some awareness back into the room again. And noticing what the experience was. Maybe we don't even have to put words to it. Because the mind is like resting, and it's not jumping around trying to label things as much. Or at least I think that's what's going on. So it feels like it's a lot more rested. It's like it's affecting my entire physiology as well. And this mindfulness is a way to bring some stress relief, or come back to that within experience anytime. So I invite you to, let's go for one more round. And if you need to move your legs or anything, move a little bit, bring some sensation in, some rotation movements. And I think with consistency, with some practice, that the experience embeds itself more and more with this mindfulness. So it's easier to return to that place. It becomes a little more hardwired to just go there. So definitely, even if you break it up into 5-minute sessions, or you do a whole 40-minute session or something. The most important thing I found is to actually incorporate it every day, or try to do it something every day. Even if it's while you're actively doing stuff. But in this case, a seated meditation, consistently, it's probably going to have more effect for the long run. So we'll find ourselves in that comfortable seated posture again. Go this way this time. Feeling yourselves grounded down, rooted into the ground. Feel that pelvic tilt, kind of neutral, raising up through a extended spine and the top of the head. Chin tucked in slightly. And going within in your own experience, there's no real need for instruction. It's just direction, finding what you find. Allowing the mind kind of to rest. We'll spend a few more minutes here. Coming back into awareness of the room again, the environment. Remembering that we can bring some awareness into the hands and the legs. Let's remember that we can return to this mindfulness practice at any moment. So we'll end closing saying namaste.